Welcome to Working for Women, the Independent Women's Forum podcast, where we are changing the conversation about women and public policy for the better.
Hello, I'm Hadley Keith Manning, Director of Health Policy at the Independent Women's Forum. It's that time of year when many students are graduating from colleges and universities and going on to start their lives, enter the workforce, start their professional careers. Today, I'm here with our very own Carrie Lucas, Managing Director at IWF, and we're going to be talking about that transition and also especially some advice for young women who are graduating from college this month. Carrie, thank you so much for joining me today.
No, thanks, Hadley, for having me on.
So you've got this great article on Forbes.com. It's called 7 Things College Women Should Know for Life After Graduation. And I've got to say, personally, I really appreciate this article. I've got a little sister who's in college, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners, even if they aren't college age themselves, they know someone who's about that age or who's starting out in their professional life. So thanks for writing this article. I think it's a good guideline for giving advice to the next generation of workers. But I want to ask, what inspired you to write this article, or why did you decide to put pen to paper with these 7 things?
You know, it's interesting, Hadley, because you're absolutely right. It was actually a relative of mine, an uncle who, he's no longer has college-age kids, but he works with some young women, and he thought, boy, they have a lot of misinformation in their heads, and he asked if I had an article that would dispel some of the myths that they may have heard in college, and I thought to myself, I don't know anything off the top of my head, but that would be a great piece to write, and that's what made me want to put this together.
Yeah, that is a transition from the sort of the theoretical world of the university to the practical working world. So for young women today, I think especially for women who have college degrees, there are just so many opportunities professionally and so many choices ahead of them. Myself, I was just completely overwhelmed making these choices. I felt completely underprepared to make big decisions about what to major in or what kind of job to apply for, how to apply for certain jobs. So can you talk a little bit about these choices that are available to young women today, and if you have any advice for just how to navigate those big decisions?
It's interesting because, on one hand, a lot of people who are graduating from college today, feel like they don't have that many choices because we don't have a great job market right now. So there's a lot of people out there who are frustrated and are looking for any sort of work. So that's one challenge that they face. But I think that a lot of young women out there, who've been told and been kind of an environment where you talk a lot or you think a lot about the difficulties of being a woman, and is there discrimination you're going to face, and the limitations of that women have historically had. These women who are graduating today should feel incredibly lucky because yes, there's a not so great job market and economy out there, but the jobs that do exist, the opportunities that are open, they are open to men and women, and women are succeeding. In many ways, women are doing better than men in today's economy, so they shouldn't feel like their sex is going to hinder them in any way, and they need to start thinking strategically, because you're absolutely right that they have a lot of choices when it comes to profession and to what they want to focus their lives on, and it's hard because for so many people they have a natural progression from high school to college, and that seems like kind of the obvious path they're going to take. Or once you leave college, there's a lot of question marks. Do I continue with school? Do I find a job? If so, what job? So you're right that it really becomes tricky for a lot of women out there.
Yeah, I was really confused about, should I just do whatever it is that I like to do? Like, I enjoy musical theater. Should I just become an actress, or should I look at the marketplace and say, wow, looks like there's a real need for nurses, but I hate the idea of working, with blood or bodily fluids. That's just not my calling. So finding sort of the intersection of those things, your passions and, maybe what is in demand, I think is a real challenge for people who've never been in the workforce before. But, this issue of being a young woman in the workplace, I guess a lot of them may be thinking about workplace discrimination. So what do you think college women should know about workplace discrimination before they, start on their first maybe professional job? A lot of them may be surely thinking about this wage gap or about sexism, maybe fearful that their boss won't treat them fairly. How should they think about or approach those issues?
Yeah, I think one of the most important things that young women should keep in mind as they're looking for those first jobs and thinking about their expectations for what their workplace is going to be like, is that you shouldn't be looking for discrimination. There certainly are going to be bad bosses out there, and discrimination occurs, and you might come up with it's not going to be a perfect road ahead of you, but you really should have no reason to expect that you are going to be mistreated by your bosses. And in fact, I think that you'll see in the kind of view people get of workplaces from shows like Mad Men, and is that you're going to be working for this old stodgy old man who is going from a different era, and when in fact most likely you're going to start working when you get hired to your first job, you're going to be working for someone, reporting to someone who's just a couple years older than you are. He or she is going to have been educated in largely the same way that you are. It's very unlikely that you're going to have a raging sexist as your superior. Women are actually more likely than men to be managers, so you're quite possibly going to be reporting to a woman, and you should really expect the best. Someone hiring you for a job wants you to succeed. They want you to be good at your job, so that you can help them be good at theirs. That's really what people employ people to make their lives easier. So you should have, I think, expect the best, and of course there may be bumps along the way. But so much of what you hear about this idea of discrimination being so rampant is really misleading, and it's not the way you should walk in, or your expectations for your career in the workplace. That's not the way to start off.
Yeah, and I would recommend to our listeners, we have another podcast about specifically the wage gap between men and women, and IWF.org is full of resources about that particular part of our economy. Another issue I think that's easily misunderstood is the idea of parity versus equality. So a lot of young women probably hear about the number of women in Congress, or the number of women who are CEOs in big companies, or the number of women who are in certain professions that are maybe traditionally considered male-dominated professions. Should that worry young women, that there's sort of this disproportionate underrepresentation of women in certain fields? Should we be worried, for example, that so few members of Congress are women compared to the general population, or that there's less than 50% of CEOs who are female?
Yeah, this is a very interesting conversation and topic for people to ruminate on in a women's studies seminar or in some of these classes when you're in college. But certainly as you're making your own decisions about your career, you should be thinking about the unique set of preferences and opportunities, your talents, what your expectations are. These are what should drive your career choices. It would be silly for everybody to go out and try to become an investment banker, or try to just become the CEO of a Fortune 500 company because you owe it to the sisterhood to be trying to, quote, lean into a job and make those numbers balance out. What we should be seeing, what we want, the ideal situation is for us to have an economy and live in a world where people are able to act on their preferences and find the kind of jobs and opportunities that they want. So being in the medical field wasn't your cup of tea. That's fine. You found something else and have been able to balance out a dream, if perhaps acting is a dream, but probably wasn't the most solid way to earn some money and have a kind of a surefire career path. You have to make those assessments, and on average, women tend to make different choices or have different priorities than men do, and that's not a problem. You shouldn't worry about what anybody else's choice is. You should be making sense, of what you've got to act on your own behalf and focus on what's going to make you happy, because it really is an incredibly big decision. So it's silly to get wrapped up in that bigger numbers game.
Yeah. Another speculation that people make about women in the workplace is that they just don't have enough confidence in themselves, that they don't ask for pay raises enough, that they don't speak up for themselves maybe in the same way that their male colleagues might do. So, first of all, do you think that there's any truth to that? And what advice do you have to women who are just getting started in their careers, advice when it comes to how to value themselves or how to have confidence in the workplace, speaking up for themselves? You have anything to say about that?
Yeah, it's interesting because I do think that this is something that once when we're talking about the wage gap, and when we look at most of what drives the wage gap is these different preferences that men and women have for their time and talents. Women tend to take time out to spend time with children and tend to focus on jobs that have lower pay but are more personally fulfilling and have other characteristics that women like, and that's okay. But once those factors are all controlled for, there are still a couple percentage points, usually around 5% difference gap between men and women, which is unexplained. And part of that may be due to discrimination, but others have hypothesized that it may be this fact that women are less likely to ask for raises or to negotiate their salaries. And I think that's really interesting. And I'm sure there's more work being done to kind of tease that out and see if that is driving any of that lingering difference. And that's great, because that's something we absolutely can do something about. I'm a mother of some little girls, and it's important for me to talk to my daughters about how to feel comfortable speaking about money. If there's nothing, women shouldn't feel awkward. That's part of your job as an employee, and that's your boss's job is to discuss your compensation. And you should try to make sure that you field other offers, listen to what people in other areas, what they're making, and think hard about the compensation packages that you'd expect in different lines of work, because different career paths do have very different earning potential. And you should be taking that into account and talk to your bosses and ask for raises periodically and get comfortable with talking about money. It shouldn't be taboo. But I think this is something that we can, women have to get used to. And I'm sure this is changing every day, because women are becoming more used to and more assertive in a lot of those ways. So I bet that's one of those things that's going to become eradicated in time, but it's important for young women to keep in mind.
Yeah, especially considering the number of college grads this month who are probably walking across stage thinking about the thousands of dollars in student loan debts that they'll have to repay. So it's important to get the right, earnings that reflect that investment you've made in your education. So I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about one of what was, for me at least, one of the biggest questions in my mind when I was graduating college: what to do about that boyfriend. I had a really serious boyfriend in college, and I was thinking a lot about how to approach marriage and family and how to balance those things with the sort of pursuits and desires and goals that I had professionally in my career. Do you think that that's something that a lot of young women are thinking about? And do you have any advice for how they should think about it at this early stage in their career?
Yeah, I think one of the big, most important things that I hope that young women, take home is that they shouldn't be shy about taking this topic seriously, because of course everybody's thinking about boyfriends and relationships, but I think that a lot of young women are told that that's really something that should come that's secondary, that it's silly. You can have your relationships, but you can't really think about getting serious until after your career is started and you are more, later on, and you should wait some years out of college and kind of find yourself and focus on both having fun and building a career. I don't think anybody should feel pressure that they need to try to, get married right out of college. But I think it's terrible advice to say that you're too young to start looking and taking relationships seriously. You should be thinking now about the kind of partner that you want to spend your life with, and make sure that when you're kind of building this idea of what kind of career you want, where you want to live, how you want to spend your time, who your partner is. If you're hoping to get married, nothing is going to be more important or more determinative of your happiness, and even your financial security, than making a good choice when it comes to marriage. I think that this idea you'll see in kind of the Cosmo and women types magazines is that you should be sowing your wild oats when you're in your 20s. When I think, in fact, you should kind of take your personal life as seriously as you would your career. Start making smart choices about trying to find a life partner. And if you're lucky enough to find that guy early on, you should consider yourself very fortunate that you get to make that decision and to spend more time in these important formative years building a career together. I don't think that should be seen as a handicap or a weakness. That can be a real blessing. So I don't think that it's a mistake to start thinking about marriage and family formation earlier rather than later.
Yeah, and a lot of young people who are graduating college today, they might be really high caliber young people going on to graduate programs or different job opportunities in different parts of the country. And I know in my personal experience that caused a lot of tension in my relationship with my boyfriend, who's now my husband. But eventually you do have to start, thinking about the future and thinking about long term. And one thing you said kind of interests me, Carrie, about, societal pressure, either pressure to go ahead and get married, or maybe pressure in the opposite direction to delay marriage or to delay having children. How do you think the societal pressures that women might face today compare to maybe other generations of women? Do you have any advice for young women about how to navigate that? And do you think that a lot of women in today's graduating class feel like they are free to think independently about marriage and family decisions, or do you think that they are feeling a lot of peer pressure or pressure from parents and society at large?
I hope that we are moving towards kind of an era where people are encouraged to, feeling a little bit more balanced. Where certainly I think that, a generation or two ago, women felt incredible pressure to be getting married, and they had to be married, early if they went to college, to early after college, it would be considered, a great priority that they had to find a husband. Where now certainly that's not in the cards for a lot of college-educated women. I think, if anything, you're hearing messages in the other direction, that they're too young to settle down. But I'm hopeful that there's a little bit more balance, and that people are, feeling more free to act on their own preferences, and to be, looking for that soulmate and looking for that partner. But not feeling that it's because of the clock's ticking in either direction. Certainly our society has a lot of bad messages when it comes to relationships, but I don't think that there's the big time pressure that there used to be a generation ago.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's some good news, that hopefully people are less judgmental of other people's decisions. I think we can make broad stereotypes about, women in urban centers with high levels of education, probably marrying later than their cohort in more rural areas with less education. But ultimately, we're all individuals, and we have to make these decisions based on our individual circumstances. So I mentioned my own marriage. I got married about a year ago. And one thing that was a challenge for me was just merging my life with someone else's, because when I was young in college and just after college, I was really only thinking about my life in terms of myself. What do I want? What's best for me? And it was kind of all about me, Hadley. But then I found out over time that the life's not really like that. And in a way, being married for about a year, it's been refreshing to consider someone else's interests as well as my own. But I wanted to ask you, Carrie, if you think that our modern parenting and education techniques and trends are really preparing young women as well as young men to sort of know how to form relationships and form families, or do you think that we have focused so much on the self, self-esteem, self-confidence, your own dreams, follow your dreams, these messages for kids, is that making it hard for young people to learn how to compromise and to form families?
Well, yeah, I think certainly there's this emphasis on, in the same way that I think so many young women are being pushed into this idea that, career should be everything. And if you haven't, if you're not reaching for the corner office, you're making a mistake. I think that's a message that's often pushed on women in college, kind of too strongly. And while, I think it's great if anybody who wants to go and you try to, make a lot of money or become a top corporate leader or become, a congresswoman or president or have one of these roles, that's a wonderful thing, of course. But we all have, life's a lot more than that. And, you should be thinking about your career choices in terms of building kind of the life you want, that, including, making money, but then also these other attributes. And the same thing, I think, with kind of life partnerships and with getting married. I think you're right that I think too often people approach relationships, or the message you're getting early on is that you have to be that it should be all about you and that every moment should be, total bliss and happiness, where that's really not realistic over the long term. You want to find somebody who is, you love, of course, but is also shares your vision and is going to have a lasting long-term relationship with, and that you're going to recognize there's going to be some ups and downs. So I do think it's important for people to have, both, realistic expectations, but then also have this mindset of you're going to have to make sacrifices along the way, both in terms of your careers. You can't have everything. You can't be both an astronaut and a professional ballerina. You've got to just choose, make some choices, and there's going to be a lot of trade-offs. And same with relationships. It's being a grown-up is hard in many ways because it is closing a lot of doors. But hopefully you can, with having a real understanding of the options out there, and putting making some smart choices. Women today should feel incredibly optimistic that they can build the lives they want.
Yeah, I agree. And ultimately, it's about thinking about what satisfies you the most, what brings you the greatest satisfaction. That's not always reflected in a paycheck or in some social status that comes along with a particular job. But it is something that's hard for each person to think about. These choices are not easy. But we certainly want to wish the graduating class of 2015 the best as they start to navigate some of these trade-offs and realities and some of the many opportunities that we hope are ahead of them. Carrie, I wanted to ask you in wrapping up if there's anything from your article that we didn't get a chance to discuss, or broad advice that you might want to offer young women who are entering the workforce or going on to graduate school or maybe starting families of their own, just getting started on this next chapter of life. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I think that the main thing is just to have a good attitude and have, kind of look for the best. Don't carry this kind of women's studies baggage of assuming you're going to be a victim and that kind of life owes you everything. You're going to have to sacrifice a lot and make a lot of trade-offs, but they're your choices to make, but you have to make them. And so, come out there and really start, put your best foot forward and try to look for the best. And you've got a lot of opportunities ahead. So I think there's so much good news for college graduates today that I hope everybody kind of comes out with the right attitude and can hit the ground running.
Yeah, it sounds like being an adult is a lot of responsibility, but it's actually pretty empowering. So thanks for that positive end note. I want to let our listeners know that they want to hear more about what we have to say at the Independent Women's Forum. Our website is iwf.org. We've written a lot about these issues and the trade-offs that women face in the workplace at every age. So I encourage our listeners to go there and read more if they're interested. Thank you, Carrie, so much for being my guest today. For those of you who've listened to this podcast, we thank you for your time. And again, to all those recent college graduates out there, we say congratulations and best wishes. Your future is what you make of it.
If you enjoyed listening to this podcast, please give it a thumbs up, share it on social media, or stop by iwf.org for similar content.